In the rugged highlands of Mexico, where the mountains stand tall and silent, and the skies stretch wide and endless, there exists a mystery that defies explanation. The air is thick with legend in these parts, where the old ways still linger, and the spirits of the past are never far from the minds of the living. But in the early 2000s, something new and terrifying took hold of the imagination of the people. A phenomenon so strange, so utterly beyond comprehension, that it seemed to belong to another world entirely. They were called Los Humanoides Voladores, the Flying Humanoids. The first sighting was recorded in 2004 in the city of Monterrey, a bustling metropolis surrounded by the ancient Sierra Madre Mountains. The day was clear, the sun casting a golden light over the city, when a police officer named Leonardo Samaniego had an encounter that would change his life forever. He was on a routine patrol, driving through the quiet streets of Colonia Linda Vista, when something in the sky caught his attention. At first, he thought it was a large bird, a black mass hovering in the distance. But as he drove closer, he realized it was something far more bizarre. The figure was humanoid in shape, tall, thin, with arms and legs, but it moved in a way no human could. It floated, seemingly defying the laws of gravity, its dark form silhouetted against the bright sky. The closer he got, the more detail he could make out. The figure wore what appeared to be a cloak or a cape, billowing in the wind, and its head was covered by what looked like a helmet or a hood. As Leonardo stared in disbelief, the figure suddenly turned and began to move toward him, its speed increasing with unnatural rapidity. Panic surged through him as he realized it was coming straight for his patrol car. His hands shook as he tried to accelerate, but it was too late. The humanoid figure descended upon the vehicle, crashing onto the hood with a force that shook the entire car. Leonardo caught a glimpse of its face, if it could be called a face, an expressionless mask, cold and alien, devoid of any emotion or humanity. Terrified, he threw the car into reverse, tires screeching as he backed away, but the figure clung to the vehicle, its grip strong, its presence suffocating. Desperate, Leonardo swerved violently, trying to shake the creature off. Finally, it released its hold, and as he sped away, he watched in the rearview mirror as the humanoid lifted into the air, disappearing into the sky with an eerie, fluid motion that made his blood run cold. Shaken and disoriented, Leonardo reported the incident to his superiors, but his story was met with skepticism. The official explanation was that he had been attacked by an unknown assailant, a thief, perhaps, or someone playing a cruel prank. But Leonardo knew what he had seen, and as the days passed, he discovered he was not alone. Soon after his encounter, more reports began to surface from across the region. People from different walks of life, farmers, students, housewives, claimed to have seen similar figures in the sky. Some described them as angels, others as demons, but all agreed on one thing: these beings were not of this world. In the small town of Guadalupe, a woman named Rosa witnessed something she would never forget. It was late afternoon, and she was hanging laundry in her backyard when she noticed something strange in the sky. At first, she thought it was a storm cloud, dark and ominous, but then she saw it move, slowly at first, then with increasing speed, as if it had spotted her. The figure, tall and cloaked, flew directly overhead, its shadow passing over her like a dark omen. Rosa dropped the clothes she was holding, her heart pounding in her chest as the figure circled above, its movements deliberate, predatory. She could feel its gaze upon her, cold and piercing, even though she could not see its eyes. It hovered there for what felt like an eternity before it finally flew off, disappearing into the mountains. Rosa was left trembling, her mind reeling with the impossibility of what she had just witnessed. As word of the sighting spread, the phenomenon took on a life of its own. The media seized upon the story, and soon, the flying humanoids were the talk of the nation. Television stations broadcast grainy footage, captured by shaky hands, of dark figures gliding through the sky. The images were blurry, the figures little more than silhouettes, but they were enough to stoke the fires of fear and fascination. Some claimed the flying humanoids were extraterrestrial beings, visitors from another planet observing humanity from above. Others believed they were manifestations of ancient spirits, guardians or avengers sent to watch over the land. There were those who whispered of secret government experiments, of soldiers trained in the art of flight, cloaked in technology beyond the grasp of ordinary citizens. But the truth, as it so often does in such cases, remained elusive. In the city of Mexico, a group of researchers, led by a man named Carlos Trejo, took it upon themselves to investigate the phenomenon. Trejo, a controversial figure in the world of paranormal research, was convinced that something extraordinary was happening. He and his team scoured the region, interviewing witnesses, collecting reports, and even setting up cameras in the hopes of capturing definitive proof of the flying humanoids' existence. What they found only deepened the mystery. The sightings were not confined to Monterrey or Guadalupe. Reports came in from all over Mexico: Tijuana, Guadalajara, Mexico City, each account as chilling as the last. The descriptions were eerily similar. Tall, humanoid figures dressed in black, often with capes or cloaks, flying silently through the air, their movements fluid and unnatural. Some witnesses reported feeling an overwhelming sense of dread in their presence, as if they were being watched by something malevolent, something not entirely human. Trejo's team managed to capture a few videos of the humanoids, but the footage was inconclusive. The figures appeared as dark shapes against the sky, their forms indistinct, their movements unsettlingly smooth. The images raised more questions than they answered. Were these beings physical entities, or were they something more ethereal? What did they want? Where did they come from? Despite the lack of concrete answers, the sightings continued. The flying humanoids became part of Mexico's cultural landscape, a new mythos born out of the collective fear and curiosity of a nation. But while many were content to speculate from a distance, there were those who lived in the shadow of these beings who saw them not as fascinating curiosities, but as harbingers of something far darker. In the remote village of Chignahuapan, nestled high in the mountains of Puebla, the flying humanoids were regarded with a mixture of reverence and fear. The villagers, deeply superstitious, believed the beings to be omens of death, sent to collect the souls of the wicked. When one of the humanoids was spotted near the village, a heavy pall of dread descended upon the community. The elders warned the villagers to stay indoors at night, to avoid the mountains, and to pray for protection. The warnings went largely unheeded until one night, when a young man named Miguel disappeared. He had been walking home from his fiancée's house when he was last seen. The next morning, his family found his body at the edge of the village, his face twisted in terror, his eyes wide open, staring into the distance. There were no signs of violence, no wounds or injuries, yet it was clear that something had frightened him to death. The villagers whispered that he had been taken by the flying humanoids, that they had come for him in the night and stolen his soul. His death marked the beginning of a wave of disappearances that swept through the region. People vanished without a trace, their bodies never found, their fates unknown. The villagers spoke of seeing figures in the sky on the nights of the disappearances, dark shapes moving silently through the air, watching, waiting. The fear grew until the village was nearly deserted, its streets empty, its houses abandoned. Those who remained lived in a state of constant dread, their eyes turned to the sky, watching for the return of the humanoids. But as quickly as the sightings had begun, they ceased. The flying humanoids vanished, leaving only unanswered questions and the lingering terror they had sown. In the years that followed, the phenomenon of the flying humanoids became a footnote in the annals of the unexplained, a strange chapter in the history of Mexico's paranormal lore. Skeptics dismissed the sightings as mass hysteria, the product of overactive imaginations and cultural superstition. Others argued that the humanoids were real, that they were visitors from another realm, beings whose purpose and nature we could not begin to understand. But for those who had seen them, who had felt their cold, malevolent gaze upon them, the flying humanoids were more than just a story. They were a reminder that there are things in this world that defy explanation, that the sky above us holds secrets far beyond our comprehension. They were a glimpse into the unknown, a brush with the otherworldly that left an indelible mark on the minds of those who experienced it. And though the sightings may have ended, the fear never truly faded. For in the mountains of Mexico, in the deep, shadowed valleys and the lonely, wind-swept plains, the memory of the flying humanoids lingers, a dark stain on the fabric of reality, a reminder that we are not as alone as we would like to believe. And somewhere, in the vast expanse of sky that stretches above the land, the flying humanoids may still be watching, waiting for the right moment to descend once more.